So, what's up, everybody? Thanks for clicking this video. Thanks for tuning into my channel. My name's Simon Hill, Black American from Louisiana, coming to you live from Budapest, Hungary. Today, we're going to be talking about two different stories dealing with three different Black people, each individual story coming from different parts of the world, and both of these stories ending in tragedy for those people because they were involved in organizations, movements, militaries that are committing atrocities across the planet. And we, as Black people, in my opinion, and this I'm just laying out the crux, my thesis right here, should not be involved in any of the white man's wars. We should not be joining the U.S. military to get involved in our how can I say this, imperialistic ventures in the Middle East. And we shouldn't be traveling to Russia as they continue their mass extinction event on the Ukrainian people as well. But this is just my opinion. Let's start with our first story today. By the way, shout out to all the new subs. Shout out to everybody who's leaving comments. Shout out to whoever is sharing my live streams, which are now getting like a lot more views, a lot more tractions. At least the one I did about Daryl George is getting close to like 1,000 views. So I want to say thank you to anybody who's posting my stuff, putting it out there. Thank you for putting that out there. I appreciate that so much. And thank you to all the normal subscribers who usually hop into the chat. Somebody just jumped into the comments right now. He said the ship will sail. He said salute to you, brother. So let's get into it. Let's get into it because I actually have more work to do today. I have English class right after this. Like always, I do this in between my classes. But our first story today is about Jordan. Now, this story happened a few days ago, but I'm sure most of you have heard about it. Defense Department identifies 3 soldiers killed at base in Jordan. Officials said the dead were 3 Army Reserve soldiers from Georgia, part of an engineering company trained for deployment at short notice. Now, it's a tragedy when anybody loses their life overseas, far away from their families, far away from what they call home, doing a job, because being in the military, yes, I understand it's a job, but it's a choice of an occupation that involves you being a part of imperialism for the United States government, which I don't think is cool. And definitely our people should not be involved in. But regardless, it's a tragedy when anybody loses their life over senseless stuff. And that applies to both sides. When America says we're going to drop drones haphazardly over Iran, over Somalia, over Kenya, over Niger, when we randomly drop bombs on civilian targets in Syria and stuff like that, that's a tragedy too. And it's also a tragedy when our boys and girls get killed as a result of those sorts of conflicts being reciprocated against us because we antagonized other people. But what makes this more tragic is that all of these people look like my cousins, my aunties, my uncles, my father, my sisters, that sort of stuff. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. 3 Black people lost their lives over nothing in Jordan, a place that most Black folks will never get the chance to go to, a place in Jordan as well where they treat the indigenous Black people there like crap. Yes, there are Black Jordanians, and they do not have the easiest of lives. But it's still a tragedy to see that these 3 people lost their lives over something so senseless. Some people might say they died nobly, defending their country. I want to say this point blank: a U.S. soldier has not died defending America since World War II. I repeat, a U.S. soldier, Air Forceman, Navy veteran, whatever. No U.S. soldier has died defending America since World War II. Prove me wrong. All of the wars that America has been involved in since World War II. I'm talking about Korea, talking about Vietnam, talking about Afghanistan, talking about Iraq, talking about when we invaded Grenada, talking about when we ran up in Panama. No U.S. soldier has died defending America since World War II. If you have if you know a U.S. soldier who has died fighting in one of our foreign wars, they died not because they were doing something actually noble. They were dying at the hands of imperialistic forces. They were dying for the empire. They were dying for world hegemony. They were dying for white supremacy. They were dying for global capitalism. No U.S. soldier has ever died defending America since World War II, period. I'm going to jump to the comments right here. The ship will sail said, fighting for a country that won't even give you reparations. Facts. America hates its Black population. America hates Black people. We know this to be true. We see how they treat us every single day and how they continue to neglect our wants and our needs that will allow us to be full citizens of our nation. On paper, we have our full rights, but economically and socially, we are still kept at the bottom of the economic social ladder. We're kept at the bottom of the ladder in the US. So some people say, oh, joining the military is the way for Black people to be able to actually advance in life, get good careers, training, and all that sort of stuff. Not true. Not true, not true, not true. Yes, there have been some black people that have risen the ranks of the military. There have been some black people who have been able to get good career training and turn their lives around because of the military. But overall, it has been a net negative to our community. And I say this as somebody who lost a very good friend who joined the army, did a tour in Iraq and in Afghanistan, came back to the US with nothing, and ended up taking his own life. And I know a lot of other people have stories like that too, of people who served in the military and came back with nothing. And now another family in the US, in Georgia, no, three different families in the US now have people lost that they will never get back. What is the point? What is worth it? What is worth it? To fight and die for the red, white, and blue as they continue to stomp on our black backs. So, soldiers killed at a U.S. base in Jordan were from Left Specialist Breonna Alexandria Moffett, Sergeant William Jerome Rivers, and Specialist Kennedy Layden Sanders, U.S. Army Reserve. This was published on January 29th, 2024 for the New York Times, written by Dave Phillips. The Department of Defense on Monday identified 3 Army Reserve soldiers who were killed at a U.S. base in Jordan on Sunday in what the Biden administration said was a drone attack from an Iran-backed militia. The department said at least 34 other service members were wounded in the attack. Those killed were Sergeant William Jerome Rivers, 46, of Carrollton, Georgia, Specialist Kennedy Landon Sanders, 24, of Waycross, Georgia, and Specialist Breonna Alexandria Moffett, 23, of Savannah, Georgia. Rest in peace to all of them. Prayers for their family. I am not doing this stream to desecrate their lives, but I'm pointing out the fact here. That this was senseless. This is another senseless loss of life, fighting for a country. Even if you say you're doing a job, well, you better find another job. This is my suggestion to any young black in the military. Find another job. Until we make America a place for black people, no black man should be working in the U.S. Army, Air Force, Marines, Navy, Army Rangers, U.S. Reserve. None of that. None of that. It is not meant for us. We are sent halfway across the world to help the U.S. commit genocide against people. The U.S. Army is stationed in Jordan, ready and willing at any moment to jump on behalf of the Israelis so they can start committing another mass extinction event against a group of brown people who just so happen to not follow the Judeo-Christian values that America espouses. So we say. So let's keep it real. We as black people, we especially as black Americans, have a moral high ground. We are the only people on the planet who can generally talk about any issue from a place of morality and purity, because other groups of people have inflicted mass atrocities on other people, but we haven't. We are a blameless people. We are a bloodless people, and therefore we need to keep our hands clean. We're very lucky at this point. We're very lucky at this point that the rest of the world still admires us for our morality, because too many brothers were a part of the Vietnam imperial invasion that we did. Too many brothers were a part of the Iraqi mass extinction event we caused. Too many brothers were a part of the Afghani atrocities that we committed. I'm surprised that still people can look up to Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, and the rest of the people who inherited that sort of legacy from our ancestors. I'm still very surprised. We need to hold on to that. We need to, en masse, not enroll in the U.S. military. And somebody might say, well, the white supremacists might take it over. The white supremacists might have it. They might go Rambo on us. They're going Rambo on us now. What's the worst that could happen? Going to continue here. All right, the soldiers, 2 of them women, were assigned to the 718th Engineer Company based at Fort Moore, Georgia. A team of soldiers trained to deploy at short notice to build roads, landing fields, and protective earthen berms for U.S. forces. I don't know what that is. They find a new way to say trench and fort in every few centuries. Anyway, on behalf of the Army Reserve, I share in the sorrow felt by their friends, family, and loved ones, said the Chief of the Army Reserve, Lieutenant General Jody Daniels. Their service and sacrifice will not be forgotten, and we are committed to supporting those left behind in the wake of this tragedy. Okay, as we should. We should remember these people, but we should also remember the, how can I say this, hundreds of thousands of innocent lives that the U.S. has caused to be lost in the Middle East. since 2004, since we invaded Iraq. Since we've invaded Iraq, and even before then, we were running like crazy. We were lunatics in the Middle East. We still are lunatics in the Middle East. I believe recently we dropped bombs over Yemen, drone strikes over Yemen, killing innocent civilians. The U.S. has sent billions of dollars to Saudi Arabia as they continue their mass extinction event on the Yemenis people. So what are we talking about here? We can't just cry for our babies when they're lost. Meanwhile, we're so willing and so ready to take away other people's babies across the world with a remote control, Xbox remote control, while our drone pilots just drop them over any town or any village that they think has a suspected terrorist. Let's continue here. In Jordan, the three were assigned to a remote desert logistics outpost called Tower 22 in the northeastern part of the country, where the borders of Syria, Iraq, and Jordan converge. The small installation hosts about 350 U.S. Army and Air Force troops, according to the Pentagon's Central Command. I know there are some people that would say the U.S. needs to have bases everywhere. We don't. We don't. This is a drain on our society. This is what causes us not to be able to have universal health care. We cannot have universal health care, universal higher education, because we spend billions of dollars every year just funding military bases all over the world. I believe we have around 100 something bases in all over Europe, all over the Middle East, all over Southeast Asia. What are we actually doing with the billions of dollars that God has blessed the United States with? What are we actually doing? Setting up bases in Jordan, allowing soldiers to be slaughtered by drones. And we attack other civilian populations from these places. Is this actually what we're going to do with all the money that the U.S. has accumulated? We're just going to squander it on war, more war, more war. Bring the troops home, close every single U.S. military base abroad, and let's use our opportunity that we have as Americans with the richest nation in the world to guarantee universal health care, to guarantee universal higher education, and to give reparations to Black Americans, period. Period. All right, I'm going to continue here. U.S. troops have long used Jordan, strategically located near Iraq, Israel, and the Palestinian territory of the West Bank, Saudi Arabia, and Syria as a launch point for operations. About 3,000 American troops are typically stationed in the country. That's a lot of people. 3,000 soldiers in Jordan at any given time. And then those soldiers get deployment pay. Those soldiers get all sorts of benefits and stuff like that. Once again, this is not an attack on the soldiers, but this is, how can I say this mildly? Needlessly wasteful. This is excessively wasteful spending. This is obscene levels of spending that the US government does. We spend billions of dollars sticking our soldiers in the middle of the desert, waiting for some of them to get killed so we can have a justification to slaughter more innocents in Syria, in Iran, and that sort of stuff. Gonna continue here. The three who were killed on Sunday are part of an often overlooked part of the military that delivers supplies, maintains buildings, builds roads, and does other routine work while shouldering the risk of operating in hostile territory. Sergeant Rivers was trained as an electrician, had served in the Army Reserve for more than a decade, and had been deployed to Iraq in 2018 during the fight against Islamic State militants, according to Army records. Specialist Sanders and Specialist Moffett both enlisted in the Army Reserve in 2019 and were trained to operate heavy equipment such as road graders. Tower 22 was Specialist Moffett's first deployment. Specialist Sanders had been deployed once before in 2021 to an American outpost in Djibouti. So this guy, the older guy here, he definitely had been in the military for a long time, was probably waiting for the day he can collect that pension check, permanent retirement, permanent health care, all sorts of benefits, then boom, it's gone. This is why I'm saying it's not worth it. A lot of the times, Black people like to say, oh, we don't like the U.S. government, but at least the benefits of working with the government are actually good. And the crazy thing is, America says that it doesn't like socialism, it doesn't like communism, but what is the U.S. military? The U.S. military is socialism incarnate. You bring all Americans together and say, if you do this job, you will have all these benefits: free housing, free healthcare, free universal education, up to like bachelor's degrees and stuff like that. Everything that the left says they want, the right-wing military of the U.S., the imperial military forces of the U.S. does for its soldiers. That's crazy. That's crazy to think about, right? And the craziest thing is these soldiers are then indoctrinated to believe that communism is evil, socialism is evil, and they would fight and die and willingly go across the world like to Vietnam, or if Donald Trump or Joe Biden really wanted it to invade Cuba to stop the spread of communism. Meanwhile, communism is that all these soldiers benefit from: free healthcare, free housing, all that sort of stuff. Oh, the Craig Mack jumped into the chat. He said, "Keep grinding. Just missed your live. I'm live right now. I don't know if you said missed it because I'm live right now. I hope the live is still going. Y'all don't throw me off track. Anyway, let's go here. Sergeant Rivers was trained as an electrician, had served in the Army Reserve for more than a decade. Yeah, I already read that point. So, families of the soldiers expressed their grief in social media posts that were widely shared by friends and relatives. This is one of the saddest days of my life, Special Mofet's mother said in a Facebook post Sunday. The pain will never go away, and my life is forever changed. I will never get to cook your favorite food. We will never get to talk on the phone, and I will never see you walk through the front door again. Tragedy, teardrops, absolutely sad. So, the small community of Waycross, Georgia, issued a proclamation on Monday honoring Specialist Sanders. Kennedy Sanders exemplified the highest ideals of honor, duty, and selflessness. It reads, her sacrifice reminds us of the profound debt of gratitude we owe to those who selflessly serve our country. No, you don't serve our country. You serve the imperial desires of capitalists and rich politicians who just want to subjugate other people for the sick thrill. This is the crazy thing. Like, if America actually did withdraw from the Middle East, we would actually have a much safer world. But a lot of the violence that's caused in the world is literally because of America's presence in the Middle East. And we continue to have poor people, black and white people, because the majority of the people who enlist are definitely not from the wealthier sides of America, mostly poor people, which is a disproportionate number of us, black people, dying in the U.S. military's needless wars, needless base stations, all sorts of stuff. Needlessly being involved in something that has nothing to do with us. If you're truly a soldier and you want to fight for justice and you want to fight for your country, do not join the U.S. military. Join the protests in the street. Join an organization that you believe in to actually create a more equitable America, because we want every American to be able to live like a U.S. soldier. We want guaranteed housing. We want guaranteed jobs. We want guaranteed retirement plans. We want universal health care. We want education up to master's degrees, PhDs, all for free, which we should be able to have. And don't tell me that we can't do it, because we have billions of dollars to station 3,000 soldiers and pay them ungodly amounts of money and leave them there in the middle of the desert. We have enough money to do this, but we don't have enough money to educate our babies. Come on now. Anyway, that's the end of that story right here. Let's jump up here in the map to this big piece of land, this behemoth of a country. My God, this is Russia, the largest country on earth. Oh my God, just even looking at it on Google Maps is just astounding. I mean, you keep on zooming out until almost half of the earth is just like gone. It's absolutely mind boggling how large Russia is as a country, honestly. And yeah, it's such a shame that such a large country decides to pick on Ukraine, honestly. You have all this territory to develop and grow and use. Sure, a lot of it is tundra, a lot of it is very cold, but Russia has so much opportunity just on its geography alone. But yet and still, they decide to squander it on a useless war that is borderline genocidal. But this story of the US soldiers that I just read to you reminded me of this story that I've been dying to read for a very, very, very long time. So I'm going to jump into this story here. And I think this story is very, very interesting, but from a different perspective. Of course, the US soldiers are coming from America, a unified country. Africa is not one country. But, generally, Black people, no matter where we are in the world, generally are an underclass in this world, right? So poor Africans decide to move to Russia and end up becoming mercenaries for Wagner. Why did they do this? What was the point of this? Was there any truly honorable motivation for this decision? And what happened to these men? So I really want to read this story and talk about this. So why did three men from Africa, and here are the brothers right here, enlist in Russia's Wagner army? Some people say Wagner army. The Africans fighting on Russia's front line in Ukraine, a Reuters special report. This should be interesting. It's going to be long, but after this, we're going to wrap this up. So, y'all leave comments in the description. Y'all let me know what you think about this story as we jump into it. So, this was written by Julia Faravicini, Philip Lebedev, and Felix Light, published on June 22nd, 2023. So, in the roll call of the thousands of Russian Wagner fighters killed in the ferocious battle for the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut, there is an unexpected name. Nemes Tarimo from Dar es Salaam, Tanzania's largest city, died on October 24th last year when his unit in the Wagner Private Army came under artillery fire in the village of Odradivka, just south of Bakhmut. The stocky, round faced 32-year-old was a courageous and able fighter, his commanding officer wrote in a report on Tarimo's death. Absolutely crazy. Imagine being born in Tanzania and dying in October in freezing ass Ukraine. The world is one global village, as they say. The world is flat, as Thomas Friedman says. But man, this is such a tragedy. This is a tragedy for even bigger reasons. Because as I've said before, Ukrainians and Russians exhibit some of the most hostile anti-blackness that exists on this planet. There's no more there are few places you can go in the world where Nazis literally are a part of the political establishment, like Azov in Ukraine. There are few places in the world, like in Russia, where the same mercenary group he was working for, Wagner, was ran by two neo Nazis. Prigozhin was a Nazi. Prigozhin was definitely a Nazi. His homie, who created the name of Wagner, was a Nazi, had the SS tattooed on his back. It's absolutely insane. Absolutely insane to even think about a black man dying for a racist group of people, like Russians by and large, because they use the N word to refer to all black people. That's just the word that they use in their language to refer to black people, to fight against Nazis in Ukraine on behalf of other Nazis who are Russian. It's absolutely insane. The world is too globalized. Maybe the right wing is right. We all need to go back into our national enclaves because it's getting more crazy. I'm pretty sure in the future we're gonna have like openly Nazi people like having black underlings, right? Kanye West is gonna be like the 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 symphony maker, the composer for the next Hitler that will arise. I am pretty sure this will happen. I mean, we're pretty close to that. We have Candace Owens, we have Clarence Thomas, we have Thomas Sowell, we have a professional KOON class. So of course, this might happen in the future too. But it's absolutely insane. We all just need to go back home. That's what I'm saying now. I throw in the towel. I throw in the towel. Anyway, continuing with the story. So 4 years earlier, Terimo had arrived in Moscow to further his education. Filled with ambition, his family said. He enrolled in a Russian language course at Moscow's Pushkin Institute, then transferred to a postgraduate program in IT at the city's Russian Technological University. Nemes had big dreams, said his cousin, Rahima Kigobe, in an interview at the house where Tarimo grew up. In journeying to Russia, Tarimo was following the road many young Africans, including future heads of state, since the 1960s. Starting in Soviet times, Moscow had opened its arms to African students as a way of courting influence in countries that were just shaking themselves free of Western European colonial rule. Today, some 35,000 African students are enrolled in Russian universities and colleges, the country's education minister said earlier this year. Tarimo also ended up treading the path of a handful of other Africans who took up arms for Wagner in Ukraine. Reuters has traced the stories of three of these men. Tarimo, a young Zambian man called Lamekani Nerenda, and Komenan Aboya from Ivory Coast. The reporting shows they came to Russia in hope of advancement, fell into crime, and were jailed on drug convictions. Absolutely crazy. Absolutely crazy that these brothers left their countries to further their education, got caught up in some bad stuff, and ended up fighting for the Wagner Group, which notoriously was letting criminals out of jail to join their ranks to be the meat grinder that is the front line of Ukraine. You know, I went to Tanzania last year and I went to Dar es Salaam. And one of the most interesting things that I saw there, I went to this cafe in downtown Dar es Salaam to eat dinner with my wife. And on the wall of this cafe, they had pictures of many like Soviet and communist icons of the past century. So they showed a picture of like Putin marching with some like African freedom fighters. And this was a real photo, it's not a painting, marching with like, I believe, the freedom fighter from Mozambique and the freedom fighters from Tanzania and stuff like that. And then they also showed like Fidel Castro coming to Tanzania and different stuff like Che Guevara came through Tanzania. I remember this cafe, but I don't remember the name. But I'm pretty sure the video of it is already on my second channel, Backpack Bandits. So go check out all my adventures in Tanzania. But yeah, there is an affinity in Africa for Russia, right? Because Russia was on the side of the anti imperialist who were trying to get rid of the British and the French and the Portuguese and Spanish off the African continent. Russia didn't do that out of the kindness of their heart. Russia didn't support all those freedom fighters in the 1950s and 60s just because they liked black people. No, they did it because it was East versus West, Cold War times. So you're the enemy of my enemy is my friend, that sort of stuff, right? So that's what was happening back in that time. But yet and still, that affinity for Russia sort of still continues today because people do remember the good deeds that you do for them, right? And people remember the negatives too, which is why South Africa took Israel to court, because Israel was one of the major supporters of apartheid in apartheid South Africa, right? So that's why they said, "Oh, we're going to get back on you with taking you to the ICJ." But also nowadays, Russia is importing a lot of grain into Africa. When the war happened, many African nations are dependent on grain, which is absolutely insane because there's enough agricultural land in Africa to feed the world 5 times over. Yet and still, Africa in general is a net importer of grain, meaning that they can't feed their own people with this large continent that they have and everything God has blessed them with. But Russia still was importing grain to Africa, and that's why there still is a lot of affinity for Russia in general. And we also can't forget the fact that many Africans literally worship white people. And who are the whitest people on the planet? There's like Scandinavians and Russians. You can't get more white than a Russian. And Africans, by and large, love them some white folks. All right, I'm going to continue here. Here's a picture of Nemes Tarimo from Dar es Salaam, traveled to Russia as a student. This picture from his Facebook account dates from 2015. And here he is right here. Looks like a nice young man. Hey, I'm not going to judge a guy by his look. So Nemes was ambitious. He wanted to be a big person. Rahima Kigobe, Nemes's cousin. So, the 3 African inmates Reuters followed were among the tens of thousands of Russian convicts who took up Wagner's offer of a pardon in return for 6 months' service in Ukraine. In the mercenary army's ranks, these men would serve alongside fighters mainly from Russia and former Soviet states, but also small numbers of Afghans and Arabs, some of whom may have been recruited on Wagner's previous foreign campaigns. The 3 men's stories tell of soaring ambitions and broken dreams. They also show the strength of the bond some young Africans feel for Russia, which is untarnished by an imperial past in a continent where it had no lasting colonies. Claire Amahuya, a Kenyan lecturer at Moscow's People's Friendship University, which draws many of its students from Africa, said this bond was forged during the Cold War when the Soviet Union backed African independence movements and supported the armed wing of South Africa's National Congress in its fight against white minority rule. The connection remains to this day, even though many African countries hold far more significant trade balances with the European Union and United States and have adopted a largely neutral stance on the war in Ukraine. In March last year, 17 African countries, including South Africa, abstained as the United Nations General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to reprimand Russia for invading Ukraine. The presidents of South Africa and Zambia are now among a group of African leaders seeking to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. The Wagner Group, as well, has cemented strong ties with several African governments over the past decade, with operations in at least 8 African nations, according to leaked U.S. documents, including Mali, Libya, and Central African Republic. Officials in the 3 men's homelands, Tanzania, Zambia, and Ivory Coast, didn't respond to Reuters' questions for this article about the individual cases and about Wagner's recruitment of foreign nationals. Absolutely crazy that Wagner or Wagner, however you want to pronounce it, would go to Africa to recruit men. Russia has a very large population, and while their population is slowly getting older and slowly dying and stuff like that, they have a lot of people to recruit from. But this is the crazy thing. Putin is supporting this war by getting rid of the undesirables in his country. It's been widely reported that the majority of the soldiers who are going into Ukraine, or at least on the front lines, are like ethnic minorities. People think that Russia is pretty much all white. I believe I even said that just a few minutes ago. But Russia is pretty ethnically and somewhat racially diverse. There are a lot of Asian looking people there. I used to teach for a Russian school, And a lot of my students, when I would turn them on, you would expect to see like a red haired, green eyed, or blonde haired, blue eyed white person or white girl, right? White man, white woman, whatever. But instead, you would see an Asian looking person. And this happens more than not. And there's a lot of mixing there too. So a lot of the people are like half looking Asian and half looking white, like Hapas or something like that. So there's a lot of mixing there too. And there's a lot of Muslims there too. There's a lot of Kazakhstani people, Uzbeki people, and other Muslim minority groups that exist within Russia. These, because Russia is a white supremacist state, absolutely in its core. Of course, they don't like these people in their nation. Most of the xenophobia and most of the racism that happens in Russia is not really inflicted against black people there, because there's like 5 black folks in Russia, right? What they're inflicting the racism and nationalism and jingoism against in Russia are the ethnic minorities, the Asian looking people, the Kazakhs, and that sort of stuff. There's videos all online, like on Chaotic, like on 4chan, of Russians beating up and harassing people that look Kazakh, that look Asian, that look like, the Central Asians, who are mostly Muslim, have more Asian features and somewhat darker skin too. So this is happening in Russia, and that's where the racism is happening and that sort of stuff. And so the government is a part of that. I mean, Putin is a white supremacist at heart too, so he wants to get rid of these undesirables in his nation because he sees the demographic change. A lot of these Muslim minority groups have more kids than the Orthodox Russians and stuff like that. A lot of immigrants are coming into the country every year from Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, and that sort of stuff. So he wants to try to stem the demographic change, which is Russia, because this is a natural part of white supremacist domination. We have to try to get rid of as many of the undesirables as we can, which is what the US did. They sent a lot of black soldiers to die in the Vietnamese War. He's sending a bunch of ethnic minorities, religious minorities, racial minorities to die in Ukraine. And he's also clearing out the undesirables who would fit into the standard box. So even white Russians, if you're a criminal, hey, instead of actually paying to keep these people in jail, why don't we send them to the front lines, put them to use? This is why the Wagner Group was probably recruiting in Africa. They want to try to keep the main core of Putin's support, the middle class Russians, the intelligentsia of Russia, the Russians who definitely don't want to fight in a war and that could cause civil strife. He wants to try to get as many other people to fight his war than actually have his people fight the war to keep the peace in Russia, right? Anyway, I'm going to continue here. Big dreams. Nemes Tarimo was born into a middle class family, but orphaned at an early age. His extended family raised him in Mbezi, Kawa Masaguri, a suburb of the western fringes of Dar es Salaam, where Tarimo inherited a house tucked alongside the main highway out of the city. His social media profiles show that before leaving for Russia, he worked as an accountant for a logistics firm. Nemes was ambitious, said his cousin, Rahima Kigobe. She described him as a quiet, non-confrontational person who loved computers and reading. He dreamed of moving abroad, then launching a business or political career in his homeland. He wanted to be a big person, she said. In Russia, Tarimo chronicled his new life on social media, posting photographs from the seaside resort of Sochi, the skyscrapers of Moscow's financial district, and from a cultural festival at his language institute. In December 2018, he attended an international youth conference in Moscow addressed by Russian President Vladimir Putin and appeared in a promotional video for the event. Tarimo was also pictured at several events hosted by the Tanzanian embassy, sometimes with the ambassador. Tanzanian embassy officials didn't respond to requests for comment for this article. In 2020, Tarimo briefly returned from Russia. He tried to become a parliamentary candidate for Tanzania's main center right opposition party, Chadema. Okay, narrowly missing out on selection, party documents show. He did not stay in Tanzania long, telling relatives that his fiancée was pregnant and he wanted to return to Moscow for the birth. Reuters was unable to identify Tarimo's fiancée or child. Family members said more recently Tarimo became harder to contact and that he would change phone numbers often, calling relatives using the numbers of friends in Moscow. Somewhere along the line, he slipped into crime. Very interesting story that Tarimo had here. So he's in Russia as a student, following the path of like many other African leaders who go to Russia and study, then come back and become like presidents, prime ministers, or just generally corrupt CEOs of some venture capital. I don't know, something like that, right? He goes back to Tanzania, tries to run for government, doesn't make the cut. Says he has to return to Russia because he got maybe his Russian girlfriend pregnant and has a baby on the way. Isn't in school anymore, and eventually starts getting into crime. So they say it's very much a tragedy. But I would have suggested that he stay in Tanzania and try to work it out and bring his Russian bride with him. Anyway, by the way, the Russian people love Tanzania. When I was in Kenya, when I was in Tanzania, heard a lot of Russian, saw a lot of white folks everywhere. Don't ever get confused that Tanzania, Kenya, Africa in general is not safe. Everybody should travel to Africa, but specifically Black Americans and other Black people from the diaspora, because too many of the other people, the dominant society, the people that tell us, oh, Africa is bad, don't ever go to Africa. They're the main ones going on boat trips, excursions, safaris, staying in the nice resorts all throughout Africa. We need to enjoy that too. I'm gonna go here. So Tarima recorded his life in Russia on social media. He is pictured in Red Square in this 2018 Instagram post. Let's go here. So he posted this winter scene on Facebook in January 2021, days before his arrest. Here he is right here. All right. He was arrested in January 2021 in a residential district in South Moscow. According to court papers, police officers reported seeing Tarimo hiding items in the snow. They said he appeared nervous, his eyes darting from side to side. The court documents said he was carrying 8.33 grams of methadone divided up into small bundles, ready for distribution. I don't know what methadone is. I think that might be meth or something like that. I would not take it past the Russian police to be corrupt. I mean, the Russians even lock up their own citizens, who do nothing, like Alexei Navalny and many other political dissidents. This is a long history of political repression and people. I'm not saying that Tarima was involved in politics, and maybe possibly he did have the drugs on him and he was dealing or selling or using, right? But either way, I think I would not put it past the Russian police to possibly set this young man up. I mean, it happens in America, happens in the freest, most non-racist country in the world, right? I would not be surprised if it happened in the deep white snow of Russia. Going to continue. The court handed down a sentence of 7 years in a strict regime prison where conditions are tougher, with fewer rights to receive visitors, correspondence, and spending money. A person who was in the courtroom said Tarimo appeared to understand little during his trial and was in a state of shock when his sentence was announced. Tarimo's state-appointed lawyer, Alexander Shilkin, told Reuters that the term was light for a drug dealing charge and that the prosecutors had accepted a plea for a relatively lenient sentence. I hadn't heard that he died, said Shilkin. That is very sad. He seemed to be a good person who committed his crime due to his difficult circumstances. When was he arrested? All right, January 2021. The war began in 2022. So yeah, this was way before the war began. So maybe I don't think that there was a motivation to just arrest him to send him to the front lines. All right. So Wagner founder Yevgeny Prigozhin and the Russian behind bars prisoners rights watchdog said Tarimo was incarcerated at Yaroslav region's penal colony number 2 in the city of Rybinsk, 267 kilometers north of Moscow. Russian prison authorities didn't comment. Reuters spoke to 5 foreign students who knew Tarimo during his time in Russia. Some of the students said they worked part-time, off-the-books jobs of building sites or in restaurants in order to help fund their studies. All said they were shocked that Tarimo, who they described as reserved and respectful, had become involved in drugs. Christian Malundama, who lived in the same student hostel as Tarimo, said he first learned of the Tanzanian's arrest from the building's superintendent after he vanished suddenly in January 2021. I had trouble believing it, said Maludama, who is from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. He was such a calm and serious boy. Yeah, it's always shocking when people get locked up. But, hey, this happens. Once again, so Tarimo was buried at home in January. At least they brought his body back home. So that's a beautiful thing. But it's still such a tragedy that this happened to this young man. Absolutely a shame. So Tarimo's relatives told Tanzania media that he first informed them that he had been jailed in June 2022, almost 18 months after his arrest. The death report filed by Tarimo's commanding officer said that the Tanzanian joined Wagner on August 24th, 2022. Almost 400 convicts departed with the mercenary group's recruiters from prisons in the Yaroslav region on August 24th, 2022. Almost 400 convicts departed with the mercenary group's recruiters from prisons in the Yaroslav region that day, according to Russian independent news site Media Zona. On March 27th, in response to questions from Reuters, Prigozhin said he personally recruited Tarimo from prison. Interesting. He quoted Tarimo as having compared the position of residents of Ukraine's mostly Russian speaking Donbass region, which Russia has cast as central to its war in Ukraine, to that of Africans, who he said were treated as animals by white people. Interesting. Reuters couldn't verify Prigozhin's account. I find this so interesting, the double speak that, the Russian propaganda arm does, because they say, black people have been treated so bad all across the world and stuff like that. But that messaging is never given to their own people. They never talk to the Russian people to stop, yelling the N word at black people, to stop beating them up in the streets. You have neo-Nazi gangs running around Ukraine and in Russia doing all this sorts of stuff. Why is this messaging never given to them? I really hate when some white people absolve themselves from the sins of a few white people, because what I'm saying is this. I'm not saying that every white person should feel hella guilty or something like that, but Russians and other Europeans like to say, oh, our country never inflicted slavery, therefore none of us could ever be racist ever. None of us could ever be racist ever. Yet and still, they never think of the cognitive dissonance and how ridiculous this claim is. I get called a racist all the time, even though I can't be racist. Why? I get called a racist all the time, even though I can't be racist. Why? Because my wife is white. I can't be racist at all. I do not hate white people at all, period. But people call me racist just for talking about racism and anti-blackness and white supremacy and how it affects the world. But let's take it a fact that you did label that claim at me of being racist. I could easily say to you with the same retort, with the ideas that you say, I could never be racist because my ancestors never enslaved anybody. We didn't capture and whip on white people. If you're going to make that argument that nobody can ever be racist because their ancestors never did anything to anybody, it doesn't make sense. Somebody can be anti-Semitic without being involved in the Holocaust, or nobody in their lineage being involved in the Holocaust, or nobody in their nation being involved in the Holocaust. America fought against the Nazis, and we have a ton of anti-Semites in America. Is somebody going to say no American can ever be anti-Semitic? America can never be an anti-Semitic nation? America can never be a racist nation because they fought against the Nazis? No, that doesn't make sense. So let's stop all that. Russia is an anti-black country. Russia is a very racist country. Russia is a very xenophobic country and nationalistic country. We just need to be absolutely clear. And just because they didn't colonize Africa doesn't mean that their colonization of their country, which Russia is just one big, large colony where white folks from the West uh, brutalized people in the West marching in the East marching forward. Sorry, white folks in the West marched eastward and just colonized all these different groups of people, because in here, yeah, there are white Russians here, but these areas all across Russia are full of people who look very Asian, practice Islam or other animistic religions and stuff like that. And yeah, let's just keep this absolutely real. Going to continue here. So Tarimo last contacted his relatives in October, according to several media reports in Tanzania. He said he was going deep into the mountains to serve food to soldiers and that he would be unreachable for some time. He promised to come back to Tanzania in January 2023, if God wished it. So, an aerial view of Bakhmut, the scene of some of the most intense fighting of the war, 93rd Koloneli Yar Brigade, handout via Reuters. So, let's continue. Hello, I have bad news for you. Life was filled with promise for Lemakani Nirienda. When aged 19, he left his home in Zambia to continue his education in Russia. It was 2019. The outstanding student and devout Christian had won a Zambian government scholarship to study nuclear engineering in Moscow. But Nyarenda didn't complete his studies. In November last year, his family learned he too had died in Ukraine fighting for Wagner. The news came in a text message from an unknown number. Hello, I have bad news for you. Your son took part in a military operation in Ukraine. Unfortunately, he tragically died. Will you be able to arrive in Russia? Lemenkani left a will and personal belongings for you. I am very sorry with all my heart. The message said nothing more about the circumstances of his death. Absolutely tragic. that somebody would message you that your son died in broken English. In broken English, imagine getting a text, hello, your son is gone. He died in snows of Ukraine. Can you come get body? We will either give body to butcher shop or give it to you. Let me know by Wednesday. And by Wednesday, they mean Tuesday when they say it because they don't know English. I'm serious. They're absolutely insane that that could happen to somebody. That's absolutely tragic. But once again, black folks, we need to realize, once again, this young brother should be alive. He should not have, if he was in jail for drugs, he should have sat his ass down and did his bid. Because at the very least, black folks, we have to get this absolutely clear. We should not fight in anybody else's wars. If you are not a member of a African nation's military, you should not be joining anybody's army, period. We shouldn't be in the French forces, the British forces, the American forces, Canadian forces, Brazilian forces. None of that. None of that. In the world that we live in this white supremacist world, our soldiers should be in African militaries or fighting against the governments that continue to oppress our people, period. There is no reason to join Wagner, join Azov, join Ukrainian resistance fighters or the Russian military. There's no reason to join any of that. None of that, period. It's absolutely retarded. It's retarded. I'm dropping the R word. I gotta let it out. All right. Nyirenda was born into a devout Baptist family in the Zambian capital, Lusaka's North Mead neighborhood, an upper middle class district of large houses and tarmac streets. His father is an engineering professor, educated in the United States and South Africa. Nyirenda attended a succession of private schools. So this guy is like the elite of the elite. This is crazy. Russia won't send their elite to go, because I'm guarantee you there is not a single Russian soldier serving in Ukraine right now who lived in the upper middle class area of Moscow, who attended a number of private schools, and who their parents were educated in the United States and made tons of money. There is not one Russian doing that. But they'll send a black man to go and do that. They'll send a black man to go and die in the snow of Ukraine for some cause he doesn't believe in, for a bunch of people that will call him nigger. Nigger. This is the word that they have in Russian for our people. Nigger. Nigger. They'll call him nigger and then let him die in the snow of Ukraine. This is what really he died for. And it's absolutely tragic. So Lemekani Nyirenda was 19 when he left Zambia for Russia. The family's pastor, Ronald Califungwa, oh my God, these African names. Ronald Califungwa told Reuters that Nyirenda drifted away from his parents' faith as a teenager, but returned to Christianity in 2018 when he was born again. Nyirenda's social media post showing a young man with a toothy grin and dreadlocked hair testify to an intense interest in the politics of his homeland and a renewed, deep Christian faith. Thank you, Lord, for seasons. Thank you, Lord, for summer. He wrote on Instagram in June 2020 at the height of the COVID pandemic, accompanied by photographs of himself and an unidentified friend in Moscow, posing for the camera, dressed in their summer clothes and smiling widely. Took a walk with the guys today. It was therapeutic on so many levels. Number one, recommend y'all to make time for walks in the morning. Okay. Or in the evening. Sorry. Doesn't matter. This guy, if you ever have African friends, the number one thing that they like to do on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on Twitter, whatever, is post about religion. There's not one African, now I'm talking about real African, who does not love religion. They do not love some white man's mythical creation of God, right? There's not one African who's a Christian who doesn't at least post once. There's not one African who does not at least post once on their Facebook how much they love Jesus, Bible scriptures, quotes from the Pope, I don't know, or pictures of white Jesus all over their timeline. You'll see it. If you got true African friends, they love them some Jesus. And if they're Muslim, they love them some Islam. Posting all sorts of surahs and ayats, posting all sorts of like nasheeds and stuff like that. You'll see it. You got to get some African friends, man, and start getting them talking about religion. They will not shut up. They will not shut up. It's absolutely crazy. All right. So let's go here. Relatives describe Nyirenda as a family-oriented person with a sense of fun, invariably introducing his mother to friends as Queen Mother. He excelled academically. In 2019, after a year at a Christian college in Zambia, he and his twin brother, Zikonde, won government scholarships to study abroad. Zikonde in China and Lemekani in Russia. Enrolling at Moscow's National Research Nuclear University, what a long name. In September 2019, Nyirenda launched a YouTube account where he uploaded whimsical several videos about his life in Russia, his homesickness, his telling Bible stories, often from the modest student dormitory bedroom that he shared with two others. Several people who knew Niarenda said that he missed his hometown Baptist church and had difficulty finding a congregation to join in Russia. All right, so this is the young man here. All right. All right, just living his life, man. Reminds me of myself, man. You know, I'm traveling outside. I sometimes do vlogs and videos and fun content like that. You know, I see myself in this young man. It's absolutely a shame that he lost his life. So, social distancing has made me reach new extremes of boredom, which has made me do weird things. When I'm bored, I tend to make very poor decisions. Lemenkani Niarenda, in a YouTube video posted a day before his arrest. In the month that followed, Niarenda too became involved in the drug trade. In a May 2020 YouTube video, he said that his financial situation had improved and that he was learning to manage his money better. I'm not broke, struggling student anymore. I'm just a broke student, he said. He was arrested in August that year. According to court documents reviewed by Reuters, Niarenda told investigators that he had posted an advert online looking for work and received a call offering him a gig transporting small bundles around Moscow. He was to hide the bundles at set locations. In return, he received 200 rubles or $2.40 per bundle, according to the court papers. A person who was present at Niarenda's trial said that the Zambian took his 9.5-year prison sentence stoically and was generally positive. The person said that Niarenda's Russian was good and that he needed little help understanding the proceedings. Reuters was able to establish via an online system for contacting Russian prisons that Niarenda served his sentence in Tivers region strict regime penal colony number 180 kilometers northwest of Moscow. Prison authorities didn't comment. All right. So Niarenda's family and friends said he was a model prisoner during his spell behind bars. Family friend Christopher Kongwa told Reuters that after his arrest, Niarenda asked the Zambian embassy in Moscow to forward him his Bible and toiletries bag. In a eulogy at her brother's funeral, Niarendra's older sister, Tiange, said during his 2 years as an inmate, he read all the books in the prison library, learned fluent Russian, and taught himself to sew. She said he had proudly showed her his hand-stitched prison uniform during a video call, a rare privilege for Russian prisoners, which she said prison authorities allowed him as a reward for his good behavior. So this brother was in here doing his thing. I mean, imagine what he could have been outside, but he just made a very bad choice as a young person, right? And if you are a young person in college, listen, growing up in the US, every white boy at college that I knew that I went to, and I went to a PWI, predominantly white institution for my university. All of them did drugs. All of them were selling drugs to each other and also to other people. It's everywhere. It's rampant, right? So Russia, I believe, probably has very strict drug laws, like a lot of Asian countries do. I went to Indonesia. They'll literally give you the death penalty for transporting drugs in Indonesia, Malaysia, that sort of stuff. Probably the same. We saw what they did to Brittany Griner. Brittany Griner showed up with a grinder that had like marijuana residue. And what happened? Brittany Griner got like 2 years in Russian prison, right? Yeah, Russia likes to lock up people for drugs. Possibly it's for political reasons. Possibly they just like to be draconian for no reason, just to lock up people. But it's absolutely not cool. It's not cool that this happened to this young man. All right. During her eulogy, which was streamed online, Tiange also said that her brother had told her during their last video call that incarceration had revealed a hitherto unknown inner strength. He told me and my husband how he didn't know that he was so strong, said Tiange, dressed in mourning black from head to toe. The whole imprisonment experience has shown him how strong he was. Absolutely crazy. This man, if he got to live, would have had a very interesting life story, possibly would have made a movie about him. But nope, decided to get caught up in the craziest part. Maybe he thought he was too strong. Maybe that's why he thought, hey, I can go and fight in Ukraine. Wagner fighters attend Niarenda's coffin. So this is their photo right here. So Niarenda last spoke to his family on August 31st, 2022, according to the pastor Kalifungwa Kongwa, said that he sounded in a hurry and under pressure. He said he hoped that they would soon be reunited and implied that he had been released from jail. He said that he could his father for details to designate him as word to his family was Musalawe Bino. All right, for any Tanzanians, for any Swahili speakers, pardon my pronunciation. There's a video on my second channel, Backpack Bandits, where I try to speak Swahili and it comes out bad, comes out very bad. Musa Lebuino, meaning farewell, in the Nyanja language. Okay, so it's not even Swahili. I messed up. Spoken in the family's ancestral homeland in eastern Zambia. We believe that this was the time Wagner had taken him and commissioned him in the war, Congo said. Reuters was unable to confirm when Wagner recruiters visited Tver's penal colony number one, but Prigozhin was visiting nearby prisons throughout the summer of 2022. Prigozhin said in a November 29th statement via his press service that he personally recruited Nyarenda. He said that, like Tarimo, Nyarenda cast his desire to join Wagner as repayment for Soviet and Russian support of African anti-colonial movements. According to Prigozhin, Nyarenda told him that joining up was the least I can do to pay these debts to Russia, and that he had heard that Wagner had saved thousands of Africans. Reuters couldn't verify Prigozhin's account of the conversation. Absolutely tragic. Let's keep it absolutely real. Russia might have financially and militarily supported African nations that were fighting against the British and the French and that sort of stuff, but no Russian soldiers were sent to African nations. Did white Russian blood spill for Kenya's freedom? Did white Russian blood spill to end apartheid in South Africa? No, no, no. But black blood needs to spill in Ukraine as a repayment to our debt to the Russians. No, F out of here. Prigozhin, I'm glad he's dead. I'm glad Prigozhin is dead, and I'm glad he's burning in hell because he's a war criminal too. But it's absolutely insane that he would try to make this convincing argument, or even worse, put the words in this dead boy's mouth to say that that's what he said. Absolutely crazy. My second motherland. On New Year's Day 2023, Russia's state owned RIA news agency published a video from the outskirts of Bakhmut, showing Prigozhin laughing and joking with an African fighter he identified as an Ivorian national. In the clip, the fighter says in heavily accented but fluent Russian that he joined up to defend my second motherland. The Wagner boss said he had told the fighter that he would hire him as a French interpreter if he survived his 6 months at the front. In a January 4th comment via his press service, Prigozhin identified the fighter as Komenan Aboya, a convicted drug dealer. In a separate statement emailed directly to Reuters, he said he recruited Aboya from jail in Mordovia, a Volga River region known for its large prison population. Aboya's friends in Ivory Coast described to Reuters an entrepreneurial man, now aged about 40, who yearned to be financially independent. Got to jump into the comments here. J.S. Ventress, they offered Prigozhin a nice comfort by the aisle. I don't know exactly what you mean by that. I don't. I think you mean in hell because Prigozhin's in hell. He's dead. He's dead and burning in hell. But tell us what you mean by that, J.S. Ventress. So, Aboya's friends in Ivory Coast described to Reuters an entrepreneurial man, now aged about 40, who yearned to be financially independent. He grew up in Yapougon, a poor and overcrowded neighborhood in Abidjan, Ivory Coast's largest city. There, on streets teeming with bars, he opened a small video club where he would show action movies, said a one-time regular called Fabrice. Each morning, Aboya would rise early and get in line to secure a seat in one of the hundreds of crammed gabakas, local minibuses, which line Yapongon's dusty thoroughfares, in order to reach the plush suburb of Kokodi, where he spent his days working as a bus driver. So here's the screenshot of Aboya's arrest posted on YouTube by Moscow police. So he was arrested for drugs as well. Oh, Yevgeny Prigozhin said he fought bravely on Komenen's Aboya's time in Wagner. Former colleagues said that in 2015 or 2016, Aboya took out a bank loan and moved to Russia, where he began driving taxis. One colleague said he decided to leave for Russia to give his two children a better life than his own. A person who knew Aboya in Moscow said the Ivorian and other African residents of the city would often gamble when they met up, placing small bets on games of chance. According to court papers, in July 2018, he was sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for drug dealing. A video published online the previous August by Moscow police shows the arrest of an unnamed West African man. Facial recognition technology indicates that the man in the video is Aboya. Russian media reported the suspect was carrying around 100 grams of cannabis. Wow, that's a lot of dope. In the video, he tells officers in broken Russian that the drugs are not his and that he is waiting for a friend. So, sole survivor. Of the three African men who risked everything to walk free from prison ahead of time, only one survived to claim his reward. Nyirenda was killed on September 22nd, 2022, while storming a Ukrainian trench, barely 3 weeks after he last spoke to his family. He died a hero, said Prigozhin. He was 22. A month later, Tarimo, too, was dead. In a brief statement to Reuters on April 5th, Prigozhin confirmed that Aboya was alive, had completed his 6 month service in Ukraine, and that his conviction for drug dealing had been expunged. Yes, Komenan Aboya fought in the ranks of Wagner. He said he was pardoned at the end of the March. He was pardoned at the end of March and is currently undergoing a rehabilitation course. He fought bravely. Prigozhin provided no more information and declined further comment. Reuters couldn't reach Aboya. So who knows if he's actually alive? And this was written last year. Maybe he could have died too as well. But Prigozhin is dead. Maybe these guys were able to repatriate back to Africa. Once again, this is a sad story all around, and let's keep this absolutely clear. These black souls are all precious. All black life is precious, and we need to protect black life. And the first and foremost thing that we need to do is be unified and codified enough to not join up and fight for our oppressors, who, with a push of a button, could make us go and kill people that look like us or die for useless causes. This is what I have to say about this story. Thanks for watching. I got to get back to listening to MF Doom. I got to go back to writing. I got to get back to English teaching. I got like 7 jobs, man. I just do YouTube on the side. I hope y'all appreciate my work effort. Donnie Williams jumped into the chat. He said, peace and thumbs up. Peace and thumbs up to you, good sir. Condolences to their families. Absolutely. Peace to their families as well. And y'all check this live stream in the playback. Remember, listen to it on 2X. Leave comments. Leave suggestions. Leave movie suggestions. Leave anything you want to say to me. I read all comments, but the haters get their ass blocked.